Hi and welcome to today's video where we'll go through the most recent questions from the communications and more specifically the lost comms chapter of the communications subject. So we will go through these questions in a bit more depth. I'll try to give you some tips both for the exams and the real life flying. So without any further ado, let's jump into question number 1 out of 6. So you are flying a VFR flight in VMC in a controlled airspace. Suddenly you experience a radio failure. You shoot. Now, when it comes to the VFR questions, VMC conditions, remember and drill it into your head because this is a very often asked question also during real flight instructions and exams, that when you fly in VMC, the first thing you do is to continue in VMC and land at the nearest suitable aerodrome. Remember this, you fly in VMC, look for the nearest place where you can safely land the aircraft and land the aircraft at the nearest suitable aerodrome, meaning the one that can take you in, that has a long enough runway, that has a safe approach, etc., and that is also open. So, of course, for this question, continue in VMC, land at the nearest suitable airport. This is taken straight from the documents. In IMC conditions, when flying under IFR flight rules, the situation is slightly different. However, remember that if you are flying in visual and meteorological conditions, even if it's an IFR flight plan, you would also divert and land at the nearest suitable airport. However, there are more questions about it. I'll give you a bit more tips and information regarding the IFR bit in just a second. Now for question number 2. So a pilot is flying VFR in controlled airspace when he or she notices a receiver failure. Which of the following actions must the pilot take? So there are, of course, quite a few things that you need to know. The ones here are IK recommendations. However, in real life, remember that you have a very, very important and useful tool, especially when flying general aviation, which is your phone. If you're flying safely and nothing is wrong besides your radio, take advantage of your phone. We usually fly VFR at 3 to maybe 6,000 feet. You should have reception. Simply take advantage of it and use it. When it comes to the lost comms, of course, try not to get lost, but continue in the area that you know. If you cannot don't know what's happening, feel free to orbit. However, don't forget about your phone and also check your headphones. This is something I've heard many times other pilots do, is that sometimes people will mute their headphones or the actual radio in the aircraft accidentally, thinking they have lost the receiver when in fact it's just the volume or the plugin. So these are the two things that always remember to check first. So going back to the answers here, of course, Squawking 7.5, this is for unlawful interference. 7.5, man with knife. 7.6, radio fix. So 7.600 will be our squawk code for receiver failure or lost communications. Do not press ident unless you're asked by the ATC. They will see a big flash on their screens. This is only done after clear instruction from them. Transmit reports at the scheduled times or positions. Absolutely, this is something you need to know. There are compulsory reporting points at which you will always try to transmit your position, even if you're doing so blindly. Proceed the transmission by the phrase transmitting blind due to receiver failure. Absolutely. People need to know that you're transmitting blind. This will also let them know that you cannot respond to them, as in most cases you will not be able to hear what's happening, but you don't know if they hear you or not. So always say that you're transmitting blind and report at these points. And just like this, we have already excluded 2 answers, 2 and 3 correct. Now we have to figure out whether 5 was right, as 4 is in both A and B. Of course, transmit the reports on the frequency in use. Absolutely, there is no other, nothing to add here. Duplicate the reports on the emergency frequency. Absolutely not. This just adds the workload. Absolutely not necessary. Doesn't do much. The frequency, if you have already been in touch with someone on a frequency, changing frequency makes absolutely no sense. And exit the control airspace as quickly as possible. There is no requirement to do so. There are other rules which we will go into in just a second. Now for question number 3, when a controlled VFR flight transiting a control zone suffers a communication failure, what should the pilot do? As we mentioned before, VFR flight plan in VMC, always continue to fly in VMC. visual meteorological conditions, and land the aircraft at the nearest suitable aerodrome. So we can see the two of these are already here, number 2, number 5. So you can see that number 2 and number 5 is actually in only one of the answers. So just like that, we can answer it very quickly. Number 6 is report the aircraft's arrival by the most expeditious means to the appropriate ATSO. So the reason is that usually the procedure goes that once you land, the ATC will close your flight plan, meaning that they know that you have landed and your flight has ended. If that doesn't happen within 30 minutes, they might send search and rescue or contact you before, in most cases, using the phone. However, this is your responsibility as a pilot to do that. So the law actually states continue to fly in VNC, land at the nearest suitable aerodrome, and contact the appropriate ATSU. All the other ones do not really make much sense in this regard, neither for VMC or IMC flying if you're flying under IFR. And now for question number 4. So an aircraft experiencing radio communications failure on an IFR flight in IMC has to hold over the designated navigation aid serving the destination aerodrome. So now the question is, for how long do you need to do that? And actually, there is no certain set time when it comes to actually performing the arrival and the approach on the airport. This should be done at your last approach or expected time of approach and arrival. If you are already squawking 7600, then of course the airport authorities and the ATC will be aware of your situation. The times you need to remember are, of course, the 7 minutes in radar controlled airspace and 20 minutes in procedural, but this is something different, which we will get into in just a second. However, here I wanted to show you a plate that is actually a real life plate from the airport of Saloniki in Greece. And you can see, please don't use this for navigation, of course, as this is most likely already outdated. However, you can see that the very first page of the Saloniki package, you can see there is a big communication failure procedure written down on the first very page. So also remember for your exams that if you have the GSPRM with you, at the last pages you can see these packages for different airports, and these will usually guide you towards the right answer. Over here you can see already if VMC set the transponder to 7600, continue to fly VMC, etc, etc. However, in IMC, this airport will have its own special procedure. In this case, you need to proceed to Micra VOR DME and maintain the last assigned altitude if higher or equal to 5,500. And this whole binder will give you the entire lost cause procedure. So don't forget that if you're ever flying to an airport that has a lost cause procedure, which most major ones do, make sure you read through it and you follow it as you should. For when to begin the approach, usually you just read the comms failure procedure, and then you just execute it, as the ATC will make sure to get all the traffic out of your way to the best of their ability. And now for question number 5. So this is a very straightforward and easy question. However, it's always good to revise the transponder codes. So of course, if you are flying on an IFR flight plan and you have a transponder, what squawk you should do if you have a comms failure. Of course, 7600 is for communications failure, so 76 radio fix, 77 going to heaven, so this is our emergency transponder code, 75 man with knife for unlawful interference, and 7000 is a general squawk code for VFR flights. There is another code that is sometimes used, which is 2000 or sometimes 1000, as in, for example, in Italy. So this is a code when you're not using the ATC services. So this will be most likely used, for example, when you're flying IFR, but you are still waiting for your IFR clearance on the airport. Then you'll set 2000 or 1000, depending on where you are when you are on the ground. These are the general code. However, I wanted to raise your attention to a new code that was introduced in May 2025 by EASA, which is 7601. And this is a code that you're supposed to use when you lose communications. However, you decide to divert to the nearest suitable aerodrome. So in case of IMC flights, the new rules state, however, they are not yet relevant for the exams, so don't forget that. However, the new rules state that if you are flying IFR in VMC conditions, you need to divert and land at the nearest suitable airport or aerodrome. In that case, you will set 7601. If you are following your flight plan, in that case, and going to the destination, in that case, you leave your squawk code as 7600. What I mentioned before also regarding the numbers, so if you lose your comms when flying IFR In that case, you need to follow your last transmission and clearance for 7 minutes in radar controlled airspace and for 20 minutes in procedural airspace. After this time is elapsed, and this is also not the case anymore, however, the exams tested, so don't forget that. After that time is elapsed, then you can continue with your flight plan route. And this is question number 6. So this is exactly the scenario that we just discussed. So you have been cleared to fly level 100 in procedural airspace. However, your flight plan states 310 as your flight level for cruise. You're in INC. You attempt to call ATC for clearance for flight level 310, but there is no response. After squawking 7600 for lost comms, you should then. So as we just discussed, we are in procedural airspace, meaning we need to maintain our current clearance for 20 minutes. If this was radar controlled airspace, in that case, 7 minutes will be sufficient. However, now there is no more 7-minute rule in the new real life law. So now we only follow 20 minutes. This has been updated, as mentioned, May 2025. However, for exams, remember 7 minutes for radar controlled and 20 minutes for procedural airspace. This will be everything for today's quick lost comms revision of the EASA questions. Hope this was interesting and you got some value out of it. I hope to see you in the next video and I wish you all the best with your upcoming exams. Bye-bye, and I hope to see you next time.